Okay, so I've been listening to this album for long enough. I think it's time that I need to review it. Let's dive into this. The soundtrack for Blade Runner 2049 by Hans Zimmer and Benjamin Wolfish. To give you a little bit of context, it is the soundtrack to the latest movie for Blade Runner 2049. And Blade Runner 2049 was the sequel to the original Blade Runner that came out in the, I believe it's the early 80s, mid 80s, early 80s, the Ridley Scott film that I grew up with. I love the neo-noir. I love the fact that the plots, like the actual plot of the movie, kind of took a back seat to the character development and the world building around it. There's a lot to be said about Blade Runner 2049. It's one of the few films where I'll say the sequel is probably better than the original. I love what they did with this movie. I love what Denis Villeneuve did with Scott's original concept and original ideas. I love the fact that it wasn't just like a straight up Hollywood sequel. I love the fact that it moved the universe forward in such a concrete way. Now, this isn't a movie review, this is a soundtrack review. And I'm giving this context because the soundtrack to Blade Runner 2049 did the same thing that the movie did. It moved the music forward in such an extent that it was like a growth of the actual music. And that's one of the reasons why I love Blade Runner, the original, because of the soundtrack. Vangelis did such a great way of grounding this world in a early 80s synth experimental synthesizer presentation of music, and I love that. And so when it was applied in this one, they didn't just rehash the soundtrack as they could have, much like the movie. What they did was they took the foundation of that and moved it forward. And we see this time and time again with a lot of the themes within the soundtrack being reprised within this in a new context, in a new way. The first track of 2049 does a fantastic job of just showing us where we're going to go. It starts off in that same kind of an analog digital approach, right? Like it's originally in an analog kind of a format, but then applied in more of a digital presentation. Because Hans Zimmer is on this, his thumbprint is felt a little bit. Like there's not a whole lot of Zimmer drops, and I think it's mainly within the seawall, and I think there's another one, it's like hijacked or something along those lines, where we've got that like that kind of a sound, and I love that because it sounds like the world that they're in. I love the fact that they also reprise one of my favorite moments on here, which is Tears in the Rain, and they do that right at the end, which is like all the best memories are hers. Within the original, the Tears in the Rain, you can feel the rain pouring down on you, but because the ending of this movie takes place in the snow, it's like memories in the snow. And I love like memories being such a really finite concept within that, and how it's also presented on here, because it's the remembering of the past movie but pushing it forward. So I'm going to talk about just a few other tracks on here because it is a little bit of a lengthy soundtrack. I love Joy. I love her theme. And I love the song Joy on this as well, because it starts off very innocent, very unsure of itself, because at this point in the movie, this is where she hires the other, I believe it's a replicant, have more of a physical encounter with Ryan Gosling's character on here. And the two kind of become simpatico for just a moment, and it shifts halfway through from this very innocent, very curious creature to a very confident and a very take charge, I know what I'm doing and I know what I want character. And that split is found very well within the song, from that very high atmosphere to a very grounding atmosphere, and that's done very well. I also love how Wallace, the track that's kind of the Wallace theme, this is the character that Jared Leto played. I love how his is very guttural. Because this character has a very large god complex, it has that mirrored in the song as well. Alan Parsons did a fantastic song at the end of iRobot that had that same kind of like almost chant, like that very early type of music found within this, and Wallace has that same kind of off-puttingness, and it's found within his character, and it's bled very well within that. And of course there's a lot of songs that are on there just to kind of enhance and heighten the emotional state that's on here. Hijacked being one of those where it's very fast-paced, very chaotic, but it's also very enjoyable as well. Like the sounds that are able to capture on there is just very well presented. So overall, I've been loving this album, and you can really see where the two minds are on this. Like, you can definitely tell which ones are Hans Zimmer's and where his influence are and where that is, but I think there was a lot of consultation with Benjamin on this. Overall, I've been loving this soundtrack, as I do with a lot of soundtracks. And I gotta say, I love this album with my whole heart. It's one of those that I did pick up in physical format, and it's one that I've just been gushing about ever since. What did you guys think of the soundtrack to Blade Runner 2049? What did you also think about the actual movie? Let me know about both of those by commenting down below. Thank you guys so much for watching. You guys, as always, are definitely the best. And until next time, notes out.